You're listening to Conversations Ignite.
Okay, welcome everybody. Today I have John Bukowski with me. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi. Thanks, Robbie, for having me on. I'm John Bukowski, fiction author of Project Suicide, Checkout Time, and about 20 short stories.
So I've seen and heard a little bit. Looks like you've had a quite vast career path in the time that you've been doing stuff.
Yeah, I like to joke I'm the most overeducated fiction writer in the country because I have a doctor of veterinary medicine degree. I practiced veterinary medicine in Michigan for about 8 years. Also have a master's and PhD in public health epidemiology, and worked in government and industry for about 20 years, and was a medical writer for a while, and now I'm a fiction writer, writing the great American novel, as they say.
Awesome. So how did you get into veterinary medicine?
Well, I had three really great passions when I was in school, in undergrad, high school, even grade school. Those were English reading and writing. I loved my English classes. History. I'm one of the few people who loves. I used to read ahead in the history books, stuff that you weren't assigned yet, and science. And I decided to focus my career on science, and was going to try for veterinary medicine. I wanted to work with animals in a non-laboratory setting. So when you kind of decide on veterinary medicine, you got to focus all of your coursework and your energies on that. So really now I'm circling back to one of the other things that I loved, which is English reading and writing. I've always been an avid fiction reader ever since I was a kid. My parents instilled that in me. And so I'm getting back to something else that I love.
Awesome. So how long did you actually practice veterinary medicine?
I think it was 7 years. I graduated in 81, and I went to my first public health job in mid 88. So just about 7 years.
Okay. And then what did you do after you got out of that?
Well, when around probably my 500th use in Asia, I decided I wanted to do something that didn't involve so many life and death decisions. It's kind of a stressful job, veterinary medicine. So I enrolled at University of Michigan in their public health program, Master of Public Health, and I got my MPH in epidemiology. And then I got a job with the state of New Jersey, working in their Division of Science and Research for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Did that for a while, went back to school, got my PhD in epidemiology, and then I worked in a variety of things. I headed up a clinical research center in Prince Edward Island, Canada. I worked for a drug company. I worked for an oil company. I worked for the US EPA. Over a 20-year career, I had quite a few different places that I worked for. And then I left that to do medical writing. My wife and I decided to move back to the Midwest. We've been living in New Jersey. And, it's New Jersey. Everything they say about it is true. But we wanted to move back to the Midwest, so we started our own consulting company. I did medical writing. She does medical editing. And that's how I got into that.
Okay. Can you tell the audience exactly what epidemiology is?
Well, it is not the study of the skin. It is not the study of insects. It is not the study of languages and words and their meanings. These are all things that people think it is. What it is it's the study of disease patterns in populations. During COVID, you had a lot of people going on TV who said they were epidemiologists. I'll give you my bias. Most of them weren't very good epidemiologists, but it's the people at the CDC and others who study disease patterns and what they mean for people getting sick or dying. We do population studies. And it's a lot of statistics and disease mechanisms and things like that.
Okay, awesome. So getting into, you said medical writing after that, correct?
Right.
And exactly what is medical writing?
Well, most people don't know that when companies or physicians or things like that write up their articles for journals, a lot of times they don't do them themselves. They hire someone to do them. And that person is a medical writer, and the person takes the data and puts it into the format of a journal article and works with the client to get it to the place they like it for submission. I also I really enjoyed doing things like writing content for consumer websites, working on consumer handbooks. I did a few advertorials, which are kind of a combination of advertising and journal article. And so I did a lot of different things. I did radio scripts for a veterinary school down in Florida, and all kinds of stuff, basically writing content.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So how did you make the switch from medical writing to novels or short stories?
That was partly done for me. I was doing fine with the medical writing, and around 2008, the Great Recession hit. And all the people that were hiring medical writers decided not to hire anybody for a while. And so I had a lot of time. My wife was still working, so fortunately we had income coming in. But I had a lot of time, and I've always wanted to write a novel. I think that's true of any. That you could be a copywriter for a advertising agency. You can be a medical writer. Everybody wants to write the great American novel. So I took 6 months and I wrote a novel, and it's still on my computer, and it'll probably never see the light of day. What Stephen King calls a trunk novel. Yeah, you write it when you're not so good when you're starting out, and it sits in the trunk. But it got me hooked, and so even when business picked up, I started working on some short stories, drafting out a couple more novels, and things like that. And I got my first novel published 2 years ago. I guess 3 years ago now, almost 3 years ago, 2002. That was Project Suicide, which is kind of a techno thriller, kind of like a Michael Crichton type of book. And here's the cover.
Okay,
And,
awesome.
And then in 2003, I got this published, Checkout Time, which is more of a crime thriller about a arsonist known only as Conrad Hilton, who's trying to extort money from hotel chains by pay me or I'll bomb your hotel. And he's pursued by a beautiful FBI agent and a handsome government researcher. And until he turns the tables and the hunters become the hunted.
Oh, wow. So how do you come up with your ideas for novels?
Well, there's a lot of different ways. Mostly it comes with thinking about things and going, what if? That's the writer's great prompt. What if? In the case of Project Suicide, which is a story about how a cure for Alzheimer's is perverted into an assassination drug so that high-profile politicians are killing themselves and only a drunken genius can save the country. And I used to do weekly visits to my father-in-law, who passed away about 5-6 years ago. And he was suffering from a mild form of dementia. And when I was driving back, I was thinking, boy, I know they're working on a cure, but it'd really be nice if they got going, and because this is becoming a big problem for a lot of people. Because you see people who are really intelligent. My father-in-law was an engineer for Ford, really smart guy, and, having trouble figuring out what time of day it is. So I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking, okay, what if they came up for a cure, but there was a side effect? And I thought, well, what would be a bad side effect? Well, death would be pretty bad, but that's bad, but it's not that interesting. And I said, what if it was you cause your own death? What if by blocking the gene for Alzheimer's disease, you also block a gene for self-preservation. So that as you
Interesting.
become more aware, as self-aware, you come with self-loathing and you kill yourself. And then I thought, the big what if you gave this to a person who didn't have Alzheimer's disease? They would still want to kill themselves. So it's the perfect assassination weapon because your hands are clean. They kill themselves. How can you be blamed? So that's what came up with the idea for Project Suicide.
Wow. Awesome. That sounds pretty awesome. Now, I believe you were actually a finalist for some awards for your novels. Is that correct?
Yes, I was Project Suicide. I only submitted to uh, one award thing that was Bookfest in 2024, and it made third place. Um, Checkout Time was submitted to my publisher, submitted it to a couple places, and I submitted it to Bookfest. It won second place at Bookfest, and it was a finalist for the Silver Falchion at Killer Nashville, and a finalist for Imadjinn Awards at the Imaginarium in Louisville. So I was very pleased. It submitted to four contests, and it placed somewhere in a good category for all of them.
So how did it feel to receive the second place?
I mean, it feels good because you you think your writing is good, and you have people, friends, and just people on Amazon and stuff tell you they like it, which is good. But when you're going up against 40, 50 or more other people, and you come in second or you come in the top six, as I did at Silver Falchion, uh, it feels really good because it's like the people always say at the Oscars and stuff. It's one thing to be uh, successful; it's another to be recognized by your peers as being good at what you do. So yeah, it feels good.
That's amazing. Are you working on any new novels right now?
Yes, I actually have two that are scheduled to come out in the first half of 2025. One is called The Peeper. It's a story about a serial killer who stalks social media, and a low-level bureaucrat who really doesn't have much going on in his life except chatting on social media. He's like Rodney Dangerfield. He doesn't get any respect. And he starts to be suspected as being the peeper. The peeper sets him up, so to speak. So that's that one, and it's called The Peeper. The second one is a sequel to Project Suicide, and it's called Bad Pennies because somebody from Project Suicide returns and causes all kinds of mischief for Deacon Creel and Amy Robbins, my protagonists. So that should be coming out probably certainly by the summer. They both should be out by the summer.
Awesome. Now, you only have two books that are out currently right now, correct?
Right, right. Also, I have 20 published short stories published in anthologies or online magazines, that kind of stuff. And I'd like to turn those into an anthology of my own because I have the rights back for them. And so hopefully sometime in the next year or so, I'll also get an anthology of my short stories out.
Oh, awesome. Okay. So, out of all the careers that you have done, what's your favorite?
Well, this is the most fun. Um, and I always say you've got to treat it like a hobby and like a career because it's a hobby because there's a whole lot of rejection and you don't make a heck of a lot of money, at least when you're not Stephen King or somebody like that. So you got to do it because you love it. It's got to be fun for you. But secondly, you got to do it every day. You have to treat it like a job. You got to go in. I usually write in the morning, so you got to sit down and do a couple hours of writing every morning, and do promotion and things like that in the afternoon. So it's got to be both, but it's certainly the most fun. Although some aspects of medical writing, doing the advertorials, doing the radio scripts was also a lot of fun. Epidemiology is too much statistics to be really fun, but it's interesting.
Very cool. So you've also done a lot of podcasts, speaking events,
Yeah,
TV events.
yeah.
Um,
I've
how
done.
do you
Go ahead.
how do you balance all that well writing and doing all these other things that you've done?
Well, like I said, with the podcasting and stuff, usually that's in the afternoon or evening where I'm writing in the morning. Um, for a long time, about 15 years, I did theater work in New Jersey and then Dayton, Ohio, where we lived for a while. And so I did a lot of on-stage work as well. That was fun. Um, I have do musicals and things like that. I'm a singer too. So that was fun. But now I've really gotten it focused my creative stuff in the writing. But yeah, you make time for it. I don't know many writers who write more than 2-3 hours a day because it's hard to be creative for that long. So you've got time to do other things.
Gotcha. Cool. Um, how many different podcasts have you been on?
Oh, geez, I started in 2022 and I've probably done about 15 a year. So it's probably going on about 40.
Oh wow, that's awesome. So you're definitely not afraid to be in front of the microphone.
No, that's the thing is my wife and I sometimes laugh, not laugh, but talk about how most people's biggest fear is public speaking. That's even over the fear of death. They fear public speaking. But we've been doing it for so long. I mean, first of all, when you're in the scientific fields, you do a lot of presentations at at seminars and conferences and things like that. I've done stage work. You're out there. You are out there performing. So my wife does a lot of teaching and things like that. So for us, public speaking isn't that big a deal.
Awesome. How did you get into theater work?
That was funny. I'm a big lover of movies and theater, and around 2000 and around the year 2000, right around there, I was always telling my wife, one of these days I'm going to, I see these advertisements for people auditioning for a play, community theater production. Said one of these days I'm going to do that. And one day she plopped one of them in front of me and circled it, and it was for Man of La Mancha. And she said, "That's my favorite musical you're trying out for." So she went with me for moral support. I auditioned. I landed the role of Dr. Carrasco, the villain of the piece, and it got me going. I got a little bit of the stage bug. I would go later play Don Quixote about 6 years later. And I've been Jonathan in Arsenic and Old Lace twice. I've been in Our Town. I was Guteau in Assassins. Whole lot of stuff.
Oh, that's neat. How many different theater things do you think you've been in? How many different shows?
Probably in the neighborhood of maybe 40 over a 15-year period. You do, 1 to 4 a year. It's hard to do more than that, and it's a bit draining to do more than that because it takes up a lot of time. A lot of your evenings and weekends are used up. But yeah, I did that and I kind of spacked off of that when I went into the writing to spend more time writing, and because I was getting to that age where you weren't getting the fun male leads anymore, and you weren't quite old enough to get to the old man parts. So I said, you know what? I'll take a break, and I took a break about 10 years ago, and I've been on break ever since.
So what was your favorite show? What's the favorite show that you've done?
Oh, several stand out. One was a small thing called it's a Neil Simon play, one of his least known plays called God's Favorite, and I played God's Messenger, and that was fun. That was a lot of fun. It's a funny play. Also playing Guteau and Assassins, that was a lot of fun. playing Jonathan and Arsenic and Old Lace, being a psychopath. That was fun. So yeah, there were several. I just got to play Elwood Dowd and Harvey, the guy who sees the rabbit, and all that was a lot of fun.
Wow. Wow. I didn't realize that you had been in that many theater plays. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but you're generally a good group of people. Your fellow actors are good, and uh, really kind of brings you together as a community.
Gotcha. So you've definitely done a lot of things in your lifetime. What kind of advice would you give to people that are kind of wanting to transition maybe to another career or doing something different in their life?
Well, it's transitioning to another career. I mean, first you have to. I've heard people say one of the worst pieces of advice people give is follow your passion, because just because you're passionate about something doesn't mean you can make a living at it, or uh, even that you're good at it. The better advice is to find out what you're good at and make that your career. And your passion can be things like do some writing on the side, community theater, choral groups, church choir, things like that, stamp collecting, whatever. So yeah, that would be my advice: is find something that you do well, that you enjoy doing well enough, and do that as a career. But leave yourself enough time to do other stuff that's fun.
I think that's some pretty sound advice. I really do. So who has been your kind of inspiration in your writing journeys?
Well, I like a bunch of writers. I liked a lot of what Robert Parker wrote. I like Michael Crichton quite a bit, Stephen Hunter. But the three big influences that have been on my writing were Ernest Hemingway. He was probably the greatest American writer and the first one to kind of tell us that you don't need flowery prose. You could have even short, punchy sentences, but as long as they're put together correctly, they can have deep impact. Then I love Stephen King. I've read most of his stuff. He's the greatest for character development. You learn an awful lot about character development from reading him. And then Elmore Leonard. A lot of people don't know Elmore Leonard, even though he's famous for things like Get Shorty, which he did into a movie, Justified, which was a television series just a few years ago. That was an Elmore Leonard property. A bunch of Westerns. And he's the king of dialogue. If you want to learn how to write dialogue, read Elmore Leonard. And that's one thing I tell people when they say, how do you write dialogue? Because I've been told I write dialogue pretty well. I said, well, number one, you got to read a lot of good dialogue. Read Elmore Leonard and people like that. And number two, read scripts. I've read an awful lot of scripts in my theater career, and scripts are nothing but dialogue and stage direction. So, read Shakespeare, everything from Shakespeare to Stephen Sondheim, whatever. And good dialogue is what a play is all about.
Gotcha. Cool. Um, what's the hardest part of trying to write like your thriller novels?
The hardest part is muscling through the mushy middle. Beginnings are usually easy. You'll have a lot of people who say, I've started a lot of novels, because you get an idea and oh, wow, this is a great idea. And you start writing. And about 6,000 words in, you go, okay, what do I do now? And a lot of people stop there. And typically endings are pretty easy because you've been on this roller coaster and now you have an idea of how you want to finish it up. It's that middle, that's 70% middle, that's tough. And people handle that different ways. Some people are what they call plotters. They actually outline everything. This is what's going to happen then, and then this is going to happen. And they do that all the way through. They do that before they write a word oftentimes. And some people are like me. They're called pantsers. You do it by the seat of your pants. You get an idea, you start, and let the narrative carry you. And let the writing surprise you. Wow, God, I didn't know that character was going to do that. If it's a surprise to you, it's probably going to be a surprise to the reader. So that works really well for thrillers. A lot of thriller writers are seat of your pants writers. Things like traditional mysteries and stuff, plotting is more important. Outlining is important for something like a mystery where it's a whodunit. You got to know where your red herrings are. You got to know where your clues are. Continuity issues. But yeah, so I do. That's the hardest part is when you get to that mushy middle, is keeping it going, and usually it goes in spurts. You'll get an idea. Okay, I think it's going to go this way for a while, and you write for 3,000-4,000 words, and then you slow up and you have to think about it, and then you write for a couple thousand words a day or so later. That's probably the hardest part. And the second hardest part is marketing, which has nothing to do with the writing.
Trying to get it out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Very interesting. I have never ever in my life tried to attempt to write a novel, so it interests me. Because I assume it would be pretty difficult, but I mean, you've done this for so long that it probably starts to get easier after time.
I'm not sure it gets easier, but it gets more. You get more confidence in it. It's like being on stage. The more you do it, the more confident, even if you're nervous. I can do this. I've done it before. It worked. So yeah, you get more confident with it. And you're right about writing a novel. A lot of people have an idea that you go off for 2 months to the mountains, you write a novel, and you send it to a publisher, and big success. And it doesn't really work that way. Typically, it takes me between 6 and 12 months to get a first draft out of say a 90,000 word thriller novel. And then you revise it every month or two over a period of 4 or 5 revisions before it gets to the point where you want a publisher or somebody like that to see it. And then there'll be more revisions before it gets to the final process that will go in for on Amazon or whatever. So you're talking about a 2-year period from first idea to when the book comes out.
You made a good point, because when you watch movies or TV shows, something like that, the writer always goes somewhere for a couple months, takes a couple time off, and then boom, they got a new book. It's out. Everyone's reading it. So very different, I guess, from real life, where it actually takes some time to actually get it all done.
Yeah. Now, not to say that it's easier writing some places than others. Ernest Hemingway was asked if he was some places were better for writing than others, and he said, "Well, no, but I write better some places." And so it's like you have to be comfortable. It has to be a comfortable spot. But even that, I mean, Stephen King used to write in his furnace room of his trailer when he was struggling. He had 2 jobs. He would come home at 1 a.m. and write for an hour in the furnace room with a typewriter on his lap. So you got to muscle through no matter where you are. But it is easier. It's nicer to write some places than others. You should have a comfortable office space.
Gotcha. I was just about to ask, where do you find the most comfort?
Well, it's any place that I have an established writing space, like this around me here, which is a finished off 4-season room in our mountain home. That's comfortable. I have an office in Dayton that I write at as well. We spend summers in Dayton, Ohio. And any place like that where you're comfortable is a good spot for writing. It's much more difficult to say travel for a week, and I don't even bother taking my laptop along to try and write because I know I'm not going to be able to very well.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. When you're creating your novels, how do you develop your characters?
People oftentimes they say, where do the characters come from? And it's an analogy to acting, because they say, is the character you? Is it somebody you know? Is it somebody you saw somewhere? Is it a character you saw in a movie? And the answer is yes. It's all of the above. But they all come through you. Some of it is part of your own character. Some of it is people you see or you people know. Uh, just like actors, writers are people watchers. You look at people in restaurants and stuff, and the characteristics they have, mannerisms and stuff. You may use that in a novel, but it all comes through you. You are. Stephen King talks about the dark half. You have your half that you show the world, and then there's the other half that you keep hidden, and the writer lets that out. So I can imagine being what it is to be a killer, or like in The Peeper to be a serial killer. Um, Even though I've never done that, would never do that. But it's that part of your nature which you can let surface, maybe a darker half, as Stephen King says. So yeah, characters come from a lot of different places, but they come through you. So you are always part of it.
Interesting. Very cool. So obviously you love to write thrillers. There's different kinds of writing styles, mysteries, historical stuff, biographies. Do you think you'd ever consider writing any other form besides thrillers, or is that just your thing?
Well, I actually do have a couple of novels right now that are in various forms of revision, which are not really thrillers. One is kind of what I would classify as chick lit, and that's an actual industry term for something like a Lifetime movie or Hallmark movie type of story. Um, and some of my short stories are uh, like more dramatic rather than thrilling. So I do branch out a little bit, and I think most writers do over time. Like Stephen King writes more than just horror now. He writes a lot of crime dramas and things like that. So yeah, I think you do spread your wings a little bit, but thriller is kind of my base. I love thriller movies like 3 Days of the Condor and Day of the Jackal and things like that. And so yeah, I have written other stuff, and I probably will in the future too. Always working on something. There's always something in the pipeline, because with a 2 year process, you can't just take a break for that time. You got to be working on other stuff as well.
Now, because it takes so long, are you writing multiple novels at once?
Sometimes, often what happens is, uh, say, 6 months to write a first draft, or 7 months. You set that aside and you start working on other things, and you come back to it in like a month, because you need time to be away from it so that you see it with new eyes. And you do a revision that may take a couple of weeks. And then you set it aside for another month while you work on something else, another novel, short stories. Every once in a while, I'll start on a novel and get about halfway through and just take a break from it for 6 months and work on other stuff, and then come back to it. So it may even take longer than a year to put the first draft, maybe a year and a half, because I set it aside for a while to get a fresh perspective. But yeah, you need that time between revisions so that you can see it with fresh eyes. So it's more like what the reader sees. You can never be truly what the reader sees, and that's why somebody like a good editor is important, because they look at it from the reader's perspective, not having been a part of the creation, and tell you where it works, where it doesn't, what needs to be cut, what needs to be added, that kind of stuff.
Ah, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Um, so where do you seem to find most of your inspiration? Is it just during the day, somewhere special, like going for a walk or something? Where do you get that inspiration from?
Yeah, it's things like that. Going for a walk with my dog or something like that uh, are especially good for resolving problems in writing. Maybe you're at a point you don't know where it's going to go, or you don't know how to resolve you painted yourself in a corner, you don't know how to resolve it. That'll come just in a flash when you let your mind wander, oftentimes, at least for me. But also, a lot of inspiration comes from just reading. You get ideas from reading other people's writing, and just thinking about things, wondering what if this happened, what if that happened. Uh, a lot of people, they'll do research for a book, a fiction book, and they'll get so caught up in the research that they forget that that's only like the first step. It's a little bit of realism so that the reader gets hooked. This guy knows what he's talking about. From then, the rest of it's speculation. It's all, you're making stuff up. It's fiction. You're lying. Like a good con man. You sell it with the research. And so I try not to get too hung up on research. I try to let the mind wander a little bit, and let the story wander a little bit, to get to where it's going as a surprise.
Cool. So has your background in like science and medical writing, has that influenced how you write today?
Yeah, it does. My fondness, for example, like techno thrillers, like Project Suicide and Bad Pennies. That's definitely, I use some of my medical knowledge. And that's why I also teach a few writing courses in Louisville. And I teach one on research in fiction. And that's where I say, don't get hung up on the research, because you don't want to write a technical manual. So it's not really about the research. It's about the characters and what they do and how they interact and what they're trying to achieve and what obstacles are in their way, all that stuff. You have to be careful when you're doing fiction writing with a very technical background, as I have, that you don't write over people's heads. Because even something that I might think of as common knowledge, a lot of people don't know. So fortunately, my time writing consumer books, consumer handbooks, and website content and stuff helped me get there. So I kind of had preparation before I went to fiction writing.
Gotcha. What's some advice that you would give somebody that's trying to start their first novel or just trying to get into book writing?
The two most important things: read a lot, write a lot. You can't be, I hear people say, well, I don't read fiction because I don't want somebody else's style to influence me. Wrong. You need to see how it's done. It's like trying to build something without a blueprint. You need to see how good writers do it. And so you get a lot from just reading other people. And then you got to write. You can't say, I'm just going to think about it. You got to start writing. And maybe you have to go back and change it. Maybe it's crap in the beginning, but you got to start doing it. There's no substitute for doing it. And finally, the biggest thing is perseverance, and dealing with rejection. Expect 90% plus of things you submit are going to be rejected or ignored. That's the common way people reject these days. You send to an agent or a publisher and you just get ghosted. You never hear again. You can't let that stop you. Everybody gets rejected. Stephen King used to say, what you do when you're sending stuff out is you go and drive a nail in the wall somewhere. And every rejection notice you get, you stick it on the nail. And then finally, when you've got this nail full of rejection notices, you drive another nail, because it's they're going to keep coming. Fortunately, as you write more and write better and get a track record, you get rejected less often. But even so, there's a lot of rejection, and you got to do it because you love it.
Do you ever get any feedback from your the people that read your novels?
Yeah, you do. Especially, I've gone to a half a dozen book club meetings where they use my book, and then I come and talk about it. And you see people who didn't get stuff you thought you'd get, or they make suggestions. That's common. You see some feedback on like Amazon reviews, and the big thing is before it ever gets published, is have somebody you trust, somebody who can not like your mother or brother who's going to say great, uh, but somebody you trust to read it, a beta reader they call them, one or more beta readers, and give you pointers. Say, I did not believe this part of it. This was too easy, or that's not how a woman would do it, or whatever like that. So yeah, you get feedback from people even before it gets published, and then after it gets published, I always want to hear if people liked it or what they didn't like about it.
Awesome. So what's the next step in your writing career? Obviously, you said you've got two more books coming out. What do you think's going to happen after those two?
Oh well, I'm working on some other ones. I'm about 99% finished on another thriller, which on a first draft of a thriller. So that'll go in the revision pipeline. I want to, like I said, I want to do my anthology of short stories. Hopefully that'll be sometime in the next year. And I have a couple other novels that are pretty complete that I'm pitching to agents and publishers. So it's a matter of just always having something in the pipeline and writing every day or most days.
So how would you define success?
Well, like I said, if you do it because you love it, success, part of the definition is just you did it. Uh, so many people, you say, you never thought about writing a book. I always classify people in different groups. One is, I would love to write a book, and they never do anything more. And some are, I start writing a lot of books. They get that 6,000 words in, and then they go off to something else. And then there's people who actually complete the book, and that's just a small fraction. And then there's the people who complete the book and sell it. So success may be for somebody just actually finishing a novel. Anybody who can sit down and write 60 or 80,000 words, uh, even if it's not great, but it holds together, that's a big accomplishment. So that's success. Uh, for other people, success is a movie deal and making $1 million. But like I said, if that's what you want to do, writing's probably not the way to do it. um, it's you don't make a lot of money. Most people don't make a lot of money writing it. So in some respects, at least for me, the success is actually the joy of doing it and then having it appreciated. People at a book club or something say they really liked it. Uh, Positive Amazon reviews, and that's something that most people don't do, which they should. If you like a book, review it, put it on Amazon, Goodreads, something, because it means a lot, to the author personally, and also in the promotion of the book. The more reviews you have on Amazon, for example, the more Amazon will put it out there. So everybody out there, if you like an author, do a review. It only takes 5 minutes. Means a lot.
So I had heard you say in the very beginning, you jokingly said you're probably an overeducated fictional writer.
Right.
And I'm assuming that just comes from your background in veterinary medicine, science, medical writing,
Right.
stuff like that.
Right. That's
Has that given you any like unique perspective in your writing?
well. They always say write what you know, uh, And some people poo-poo that and say, "Oh, that's an old chestnut. We don't do that anymore." But it really cuts down on what you. It really helps the realism of your writing if you write what you know. So yeah, there's a reason that Robin Cook and Michael Crichton wrote medical thrillers. They're both physicians. There's a reason that Stephen King's characters are often uh, alcoholic teachers. He was an alcoholic teacher. You know, um, uh, if you're going to write a courtroom drama, it helps if you've been in the law. Doesn't mean you have to. You could be a plumber and write a courtroom drama, but it's going to take a lot more research. So yeah, in my background, one of the reasons I've written techno thrillers and things like that is because I know this stuff. It really cuts down on the amount of research, and it just sounds more authentic. Whenever you hear anybody write about something that they actually have done, it always sounds more authentic than if someone's trying to just make it up from the beginning. So yeah, I think it has influenced me in that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Writing about what you know. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you grew up in Motown?
Yep, Detroit. I went to school at Wayne State University. Uh, then I went to Michigan State University, and then U of M, University of Michigan. So all right around the Detroit area. I grew up in Detroit itself, at the east side of Detroit, and
Um, no, go ahead.
yeah. So that's where I was until I moved out to New Jersey around the late '80s.
Do you think growing up in that area impacted how you started your career, gone into different kind of career paths, maybe shaped any kind of your writing?
Um, I'm not sure it had a big influence on career path. Uh, Certainly, it shapes your writing. All your experiences shape your writing. For example, I spent a lot of time in the past 30 years in 20 years anyway in southern Ohio and eastern Tennessee, and my book Checkout Time is basically split between southern Ohio and eastern Tennessee. You're going to what you're most familiar with and what you know, right? What you know is going to influence uh, the setting and stuff like that. But uh, I don't think living in Detroit had a big effect on my career path. Um, my parents uh, believed strongly in education and reading, and so that had a big influence. But I don't think being in Detroit uh, was that big a deal as far as that goes. It could have been. You could have grown up anywhere.
So, besides novel writing, what other hobbies do you do?
I enjoy singing, and I sing in productions and stuff from time to time. Love movies, love old movies. I have you can see behind me here, behind the books, Project Suicide and Checkout Time, there's some DVDs, and that's part of my DVD collection. I've got about 650 titles. And so I love old movies, love history, military history, love reading military history. I usually split my time reading between fiction and military history. Um, Love to go to the theater from time to time or to symphony orchestras. Um, yeah, the I'm very comfortable. It's just having a snack and a drink and watching an old movie. That's a good evening for me.
So, what's your favorite movie genre?
Oh God, it's hard to pin down a genre. I love horror. I love science fiction. I love military stuff. I love some westerns. I love thrillers. Like I said, things like 3 Days of the Condor. Um, I have some dramas that I just love, like Best Years of Our Lives and the original Goodbye, Mr. Chips, and things like that. So I cover the gamut. People ask me, what's your favorite movie? I say, well, in what genre? Because I love them all and I have favorites in each. But if I had to say a favorite overall movie, as far as what I think is the best produced movie, probably the original Godfather. I would rank that way up there.
I was just about to ask what your favorite movie was, and why is it your favorite movie?
I think it captures a time period. I love history, so movies that really capture a time period and make you feel like you live in it, like The Godfather does, The Last of the Mohicans, Chariots of Fire. That's another one. Certain westerns like uh, The Searchers, where the patter of the speaking really takes you back in time. A movie called Cartoon with Charlton Heston, which is just visually wonderful for taking you back to the 19th century. Um, so that's something I like about The Godfather is that it's kind of the perfect script, the perfect cast, great actors who all went on to do great things, and you feel as if you're living in the 1940s in New York, the mobs. It's it really is. It has that flavor to it.
Now you also said you like horror. What's your favorite horror movie?
My favorite horror movie is a little known one called The Changeling with my favorite actor George C. Scott. And coincidentally, Stephen King says this is one of his favorite horror movies. But I like a lot of horror movies: The Howling, American Werewolf in London, some of the earlier horror movies like House of Wax or House on Haunted Hill with Vincent Price. I like a lot of different horror movies. The Wolf with Jack Nicholson, uh, Salem's Lot, a Stephen King miniseries.
I can definitely tell. I think Stephen King has influenced you a little bit, like you had said earlier.
Yeah, like I said, he's the first book of his that I read was when I was in veterinary school, and it was The Shining. And it's the only book I had read up to that point that made me look over my shoulder when I went outside at night.
Yeah, The Shining's a classic.
It gives you a kind of that creepiness to it. And so, yeah, from then on, I've read most of his stuff. I won't say I read everything because I haven't, but I've read most of his stuff. I think he's slowing down now. His writing is becoming I think he's a little overwritten. His writing is becoming a little stiff, at least to my ear. But his earlier books, The Dark Half, The Shining, Duma Key, uh, From a Buick 8, Joyland. If you ever read Joyland by Stephen King, that's a great little mystery/horror novel.
So, do you ever think you might write a horror novel?
Actually, I have written a horror novel, a horror thriller called Ars Beneficia. Uh, a veterinarian is approaching his 60th birthday, feeling sorry for himself, and his wife gives him an ancient book because he loves old books. And she picked it up in a little curio shop, and he begins to change, and his life begins to change, apparently for the better, but there's an underlying evil to it, and it involves his whole family and eventually the fate of the world. So yeah, I did write that. It's actually out for. I pitched it to several locations, and uh, we'll see if somebody picks it up.
That sounds cool. I'd love to read that one. I really would. Now, do you self-publish, or are they published through publishing companies?
So through publishing companies, I my first books and Bad Pennies is through Pathfinder Publishing, which is a small independent in Indiana. I have Bad Pennies coming out through not Bad Pennies, but The Peeper through Rogue Phoenix, which is a small traditional publisher out of the West Coast. So yeah, I thought about self-publishing, and had I not sold my first book a couple of years ago, I probably would be self-publishing. But it's a whole lot. It's a whole lot nicer to be hooked up with a good publisher.
That makes sense. How do you go about advertising or like getting your books out there?
Well, some of it's podcasts. Some of it is book clubs. I a couple of conferences, 2 or 3 conferences every year. Um, Library events, whatever you can really cobble together. I've I've followed some of the marketing advice of a guy called Tim Growl, who is a marketer for the people who have like $50,000, but he's also one of these guys who gives seminars and stuff. And I've watched a lot of his stuff, and he basically says, you don't launch your book, have a month of promotion, and you're done. You're constantly promoting your book. Every time I'm at a conference, every time I'm on a podcast or whatever, I may have written a book 2, 3 years ago, but it still is being promoted because you got to do it a little at a time. And it's discouraging because you don't sell as many as you thought you would and don't get as many reviews as you thought you would. But you just got to plug away.
Gotcha. Do you have a favorite book that you've published?
Right now, I think Checkout Time is my favorite just because it was the most fun to write. Everything kind of just flowed. There weren't a lot of stoppages or writer's block in it. It just kind of went. I love the characters. I love the. It was the most fun to write, but I enjoy all of the books that I've written. So probably Checkout Time's a favorite, and I have a couple favorite short stories that I have written. I have a couple of short stories right now out for a contest, and we'll see if they get a award for anything.
Okay, cool. You had mentioned writer's block. How do you go about if you get writer's block? What do you do?
Sometimes I take a little break. Sometimes all you need is a break to think about it, and something will come to you, like in the shower, and go, "Yes, that will resolve that," and then I can get back to this, and then you've got a whole new amount of inspiration to keep writing. Sometimes you just stumble through it. With my horror book, I had worked on it for about a year, and I was at a point where I didn't know where it was going to go. I just started writing, and I ended up, it ballooned up to, I think it was 120,000 words. And I ended up cutting about 30,000 words out of it. But sometimes you just have to bull through and say, you know what, I'm going to finish this. It may not be any good, but I can revise it later. And so I think that taking a break works. Work on something else and come back to it. Different things.
With everything that you've done, is there anything that you would have done differently?
I might have started the fiction writing earlier, rather than, I think I started like 15 years ago. That was when the Great Recession was 2008, 2009. So that's when I started doing fiction writing. I had written pieces and stuff in high school to a certain extent, but so I might have done that earlier. Gives you more time to get more things under your belt. But I might have gone into veterinary pathology. I think I would have been a very good pathologist.
For people that are listening that don't know what pathology is, can you tell them what pathology is?
Pathology is basically the study of disease, but typically after the patient has died. The people who do the coroners, the people who do the medical examiners, they do the autopsies, or in veterinary medicine, necropsies. And to a certain extent, some of it's also for histopathology. For example, a biopsy from a living person or a living animal. The pathologist is the one who reads that and says, these look like cancer cells, this looks like just reactive tissue, whatever. So it's basically the study of disease and death and the causes of it.
Now, being in veterinary medicine, I'm assuming it's sort of like being a doctor, except for animals. Does I could imagine at some points it could be pretty hard to deal with some of the stuff that you have to go through, just like a doctor does.
Yeah, it's actually more complicated than that because, like I said, there's a lot of pressure because you're dealing with life and death situations, but you're often dealing with life and death situations without all the accompanying equipment and staff. That, for example, a surgeon goes in, there'll be an assistant surgeon, there'll be a nurse, and an anesthesiologist and stuff. Usually when veterinarians do surgery, you might have an anesthesiologist. Sometimes you have to monitor it on your own and say, oh, Debbie, would you turn down the halothane because I think this dog's going a little deep or something like that. It's a lot more stress to do a surgery when it's just you than it is to do it when you've got a whole group of people helping you. So a certain amount of what will people be prepared to pay dictates that. Veterinarians don't make nearly as much as physicians, and there's a reason for that. So yeah, it's high stress, and you also have the stress of putting animals to sleep. It's the best thing, or 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, it's the best thing. It's an actual kindness you can do, but it's hard after a while.
Yeah, I was gonna say that must be really sad to have to do that.
And it's not like you do it once in a while. It's, you'll have 3 or 4 a week, 3, 4, 5 a week. Over a year, that's a couple hundred.
Now, is that kind of what got you out of veterinary medicine?
Yeah, that and what you think veterinary medicine is when you're going into it is oftentimes not what it is. Dealing with the public can be difficult. And people ask me, my son, daughter, niece want to be a veterinarian. And I go, why do they want to be a veterinarian? You go, they love animals. How do you feel about people? Because never been an animal came in yet that didn't have a person attached to it. And I tell them, my advice would be take a summer job in retail sales, the Gap or something like that. And if you can stomach dealing with the public, then you have a shot. People can be, especially about their animals, they can be difficult, sometimes a little weird. And when you're already dealing with stressful situations of life and death, it can be trying.
Yeah, so most of my career has been in grocery retail. So dealing with people and dealing with people's animals, I can only imagine how stressful it would be, because just the people aspect, and then attached with animal that somebody really loves, I can only imagine how difficult it could be.
And also I worked at some busy practices where we would have, say, 2 veterinarians working and we'd be triple booked, 3 patients every 20 minutes. And so, you're supposed to leave at 5, you leave at 7:30. You're there at 8 in the morning and you leave at 7:30. That gets to be stressful too, just from a physical and emotional and mental demands of the job.
Well, John, it has been such a pleasure to talk to you. Where can people find your books?
Well, you can go to my website, which is thrillerjohnb.net. For my 2 books that are out currently, it's the simplest way to get them is on Amazon, projectsuicidenovel.com or checkouttimenovel.com will take you right to them. And links to those are on my website. And hope everybody reads them and leaves a review. Don't forget to leave that review.
Do you have any social media?
Yes, I'm on Facebook. I'm also on X. I guess that's what you call it now. It's no longer Twitter. And LinkedIn.
X formerly Twitter.
X, formerly Twitter. Yeah, I still want to call it Twitter. But so I'm on those as well. Yeah, I also do a monthly newsletter, and if you go on my website, there's a link to my landing page, and you can sign up for that. Just enter your email, and you only get like a 1-pager once a month. I don't inundate you with emails, so I'm too lazy for that.
And what's your latest book? Was it Checkout Time?
That was my most recently published book, Checkout Time. The 2 that I have coming out in the spring are Bad Pennies, sequel to Project Suicide, and The Peeper, about the serial killer who stalks social media.
Awesome. So everybody make sure you go on to John's website, order some books from Amazon, make sure you leave a review for him. And John, it's been a pleasure, and I hope to get to talk to you again soon.
Well, thank you very much. Maybe when my next book comes out, you'll have me on again.
Most definitely. Keep in touch and let me know when it comes out, and I'll most definitely love to have you on again.
My pleasure. Was fun, and thanks for having me.
It was very fun, and thanks for being on. Thanks, guys, for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Conversations Ignite. See you next time.